Sunday lunch ended with spit cooling on my plate. She leaned across my table, spat into my chicken salad, and shouted that I was a useless hag bound for a nursing home, while my son stared at the clock like it had the power to save him from choosing sides. "You're watching Revenge Files. Subscribe for a new twist daily." What she didn't know was that the house she planned to list, the bank account she tried to bleed, and the Sunday she chose to humiliate me were all already wired to a countdown she could not stop. It happened in my bungalow on Hyde Park Street in Sarasota, Florida. June 5, 2022. The ceiling fan clicked over the table the way it always did before rain. I'd set out lemonade, roast chicken, and a small bowl of cherries. I was proud of the table. I'd sanded and stained it myself last Christmas when my hands still felt steady. Alyssa brought her voice before she brought her body through the doorway. "We're done waiting," she said, already headed for my chair. Then she leaned, spat into the chicken I'd shredded, and hissed in my face. "Eat, you miserable old hag. In the home you won't even get this." My son, Mark, was at the sink, staring at the faucet like it was the middle distance in a cheap painting. He didn't move. He didn't say my name. He clicked the handle twice like water could fix voices. I took a breath. The spit shone on chicken like a private rain. I pushed the plate away and slid my phone out from under the folded dish towel. I'd tucked it there earlier, already recording, after Alyssa texted that she had news and told me to act decent for once. I didn't know what would happen, but I knew I needed proof. I stood. "Get out of my kitchen." She smiled, a little crooked. "You'll be out soon enough." She pulled a crisp folder from her tote and tapped the cover with a pink nail. "Assisted living tour on Tuesday. Listing consult on Friday. Your name comes off everything by July." Mark agreed. My son flinched like a string pulled behind his ribs. "Mom, it's just a consult. The market's good." I looked at him, not at the folder. "You picked today for this?" He shrugged without looking up. "It's Sunday, but then..." Alyssa reached across the table, flipped my napkin with one finger, and took a video of my soiled plate. "Insurance," she said, lifting her phone. "In case you pretend it didn't happen." I kept my voice slow. "Send it to yourself. I want copies." She laughed. "You want evidence of your bad manners?" "I want evidence of yours," I said, and slid my own phone deeper under the towel. They left after 11 minutes and 2 seconds. The fan kept clicking. I washed the plate with gloves and bleach, not because I felt dirty, but because I needed to do a thing I could finish. Then I put the gloves in a trash bag, tied it twice, and set it on the porch for pickup. The house went quiet in a way houses do after storms. I sat with the folder she'd brandished but conveniently forgotten. Inside, a printout of a realty agreement with a blank for my signature, a one-page care plan overview for a facility in Bradenton, and a list of my monthly expenses she'd guessed at. No deed copies, no title documents, no understanding of what she actually needed to move me like furniture, except I'd already prepared for this winter in the middle of summer. After I'd had a scare that spring, a dizzy spell in Publix that turned out to be low blood sugar, I'd sat with a legal aid attorney at the library and made a plan. We added an enhanced life estate deed, what our clerk calls a ladybird, recorded with the Sarasota County Clerk of the Circuit Court and County Comptroller. It kept the home in my name for life, and any transfer would wait until after I didn't need the porch light anymore. Nobody could force a sale while I inhaled air on my couch. But a deed is only paper until you pull it like a lever. So I pulled. I opened my laptop, pulled up the clerk's public records search, and downloaded the certified copy with the recording number. Then I drafted a simple, polite email to the listing agent whose card I found tucked in the folder. I attached the deed, highlighted the life estate paragraph, and wrote, "Any attempt to solicit a listing for sale without my consent would be ineffective and a waste of your time. Please acknowledge." I CC'd Mark. I did not CC Alyssa. Then I made tea and replayed the recording from under the dish towel. You could hear the spit. You could hear the sentence she threw like cutlery. You could hear Mark's silence, which hurt more than the sentence. I forwarded the clip to myself, my sister in Naples, and my attorney at Legal Aid. I also uploaded it to a cloud folder, labeled with the date like a tidy thought, June 5, 2022, Sunday lunch. Then I dialed Adult Protective Services through the Department of Children and Families and described what happened, asking for guidance. I wasn't asking for pity. I was asking for the right door. The woman on the hotline was calm in a way that steadied my hands. She suggested I consider an injunction for protection against exploitation of a vulnerable adult if there were attempts to force financial decisions. Document everything, she said. Texts, emails, property records, and any threats. Do you feel safe tonight? Yes, I said. Tonight I'm fine. One problem, feeling safe and being safe aren't the same. At 3 a.m, my phone lit with a bank alert, attempted login from a new device in a neighborhood I knew too well, my son's street. I'd set up two-factor authentication months ago, after the public scare pushed me to tighten my world, and the attempt failed. I called the bank's fraud line, requested a protective hold on external transfers, and asked them to flag any attempts to add users to my accounts for the next 30 days. The banker added notes. I wrote down the case number and tucked it next to the deed copies in a fresh manila folder. At 9 that morning, I drove to the clerk's office. I wore the blue linen dress my husband used to call my courthouse dress, even when I was just paying property taxes. I filed an affidavit of life estate and occupancy drafted by the legal aid attorney to cloud title against any creative paperwork. The clerk stamped it with a red date, and the sound of rubber on paper felt like a door bolting. I went home to an email from the listing agent. Thank you for reaching out, Miss Bennett. We were under the impression the family had authority to list. I cannot proceed without your consent. My apologies. There was a smiley face in her signature that annoyed me and relieved me at once. Around noon, Alyssa texted, "Be ready for the tour tomorrow. Wear something that doesn't smell like mothballs." I deleted the text. Then I took screenshots for the folder. Then I opened Instagram. Alyssa's account wasn't private. Her side business, Sunset Grazing Boards, was a grid of artfully styled cured meats and soft cheeses on maple boards, tagged Sarasota deliveries this weekend. I scrolled to a story where she assembled charcuterie on my countertop, my rooster tile peeking in the background. My counter. My kitchen. Me, apparently, her unpaid commercial kitchen. Florida cottage food rules are flexible for baked goods and shelf-stable sweets. They are not flexible about meats and soft cheeses stored and delivered without proper permits and cold holding. I knew because I'd read those rules 3 times while deciding whether to sell my cinnamon rolls at the church bazaar last fall, so I took more screenshots. Then I opened the Department of Business and Professional Regulation complaint page, and the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services page for food complaints. I filled out both forms with dates, handles, and the address of my own house. I uploaded images of her boards, my rooster tile, and her caption advertising next-day delivery. I clicked submit. I wrote the case numbers in the folder. I put the kettle back on because I could, and because the sound of water helped me think, but then Mark knocked like he never used to knock. He shouldered the door with the carefulness of a man approaching a skittish horse. "Mom, we need to talk." I let him in. He set his keys in the bowl by the door like always, like it was still last summer, like he was still the boy who fixed my porch light at midnight after work. "I'm not selling my house," I said before he started. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Alyssa says you're losing track of things." "I'm tracking just fine," I said, and flipped open the manila folder. "Here's the deed. Here's the bank's protective hold. Here's the agent's email saying she's walking away. Here are screenshots of your wife's business using my kitchen." He looked at the photos like they were maps to a city he didn't want to visit. "She's just trying to help. She spit in my food, Mark." My voice was flat. "That's not help. That's contempt." He swallowed hard. "She shouldn't have done that." "No," I said. "She shouldn't have." He stared at the countertop, where the rooster tile stared back like an old witness. "What do you want me to do?" I wanted him to remember the boy who brought me dandelions in a Dixie cup. I wanted him to say I'm sorry like people said it when they meant it. I wanted him to stop picking the easy path. "Tell her not to come back," I said. "And don't bring a stranger into my house to tour me like a rental." He looked like the air had thinned by half. "She won't like that." "Neither do I said, and walked him to the door. "You can come back when you've decided who you are." He left with his keys in his fist. The porch light caught his cheek like the first slice of morning. The next day, a DBPR investigator called and asked polite, pointed questions about Sunset Grazing Boards. I answered with dates, posts, delivery promises, and the countertops used. 2 hours later, I got an email acknowledging an inspection had been scheduled. It mentioned penalties up to $500 per day for unlicensed food operations using perishable ingredients. It wasn't personal, it was administrative. That made it better. By Thursday, a letter arrived addressed to Alyssa at my house. the address she used for her business. It ordered her to cease operations immediately and warned of fines if she continued. I put it on the foyer table. I set my phone on top of it and pressed record. At 6 that evening, Alyssa returned with Mark, a smile pitched high. She saw the letter, flipped it, and tried to laugh. "This is ridiculous." "It's the state," I said, and slid the letter back toward her. "They don't think so." She waved it away. "We're doing the tour tomorrow anyway." "That won't help you," I said. "And you'll be receiving a petition for an injunction in the morning." Her laugh grew thin. "For what? For caring?" "For trying to exploit me," I said. "For trying to force me to sign away my home. For spitting in my food while threatening me with a facility I didn't choose." She looked at Mark. "Make her stop." He didn't look at either of us. "We should go." They left before the kettle boiled. After the click of the door, I sat on the foyer bench, the kind with a hinged lid that creaks, and I let my breath out slow. My hands shook. I pressed them against my knees until they calmed. Then I stood, printed 2 copies of the petition my attorney had helped draft, and checked off each exhibit on a small yellow pad. The video, the deed, the realty email, the DBPR letter, the screenshots, the bank case number, and the texts. Until Alyssa posted another tray, stubborn and shiny, with a caption that read, "Orders still open. Haters can choke." The photo showed mozzarella pearls sweating on a wooden board. It had my backsplash in the corner again, like she wanted to be caught. I sent that new screenshot to the investigator with the case number in the subject line and added, "Posted after notice." 20 minutes later, I received a reply, "Thank you. This will be included. Additional penalties may apply." At the courthouse the next morning, the line for filings snaked, as it always does, but moved like a river determined to find an ocean. The clerk took my papers, stamped the injunction petition, and handed me 2 copies with the hearing date, June 22 at 9 a.m., 2.5 weeks to hold my ground and gather my breath. Enough time to learn how to speak in the room where decisions happen. I spent the days between like a woman making a quilt. I stitched proof to proof. I printed my bank's login alert and highlighted the time. I ordered certified copies of the deed and receipt stamps. I pulled together a log with dates and simple sentences, no flourishes, no extra words. June 5, Alyssa spit in food, threatened nursing home. Video saved. June 6, attempted bank login at 3:04 a.m., protective hold placed. Case hashtag, June 7, DBPR complaint filed. Case hashtag. I kept the lines short. I kept them honest. I kept breathing. The mid-roll surge arrived on June 15 like a wave knocking a child sideways. A process server knocked on my door with a stack of papers. Alyssa had filed for a domestic violence injunction against me, describing me as unstable and physically threatening, claiming I'd thrown a plate at her. I hadn't thrown anything in years but compliments to the neighbor's hibiscus. I called my attorney, who pored over the allegations like a teacher catching plagiarized lines. "It's a cross-petition to muddy the water," she said. "We'll move to dismiss. Bring your video. Bring your hands, my hands. Show the judge what hands that sand tables and fold napkins look like," she said. Truth wears better than performance. On June 22, I wore the blue dress and the thin gold chain my mother gave me when I turned 20. The courtroom's air was cold enough to keep lettuce fresh. Alyssa sat on the opposite side with a lawyer I didn't recognize and an expression like she'd been wronged by a sunrise. Mark sat a row behind her, eyes on his shoes. The judge looked at our line of people like he was scanning a grocery belt full of similar items with different barcodes. He called my case with Alyssa's case together and said, "We'll hear both?" My attorney went first, and her voice was cudgel and cushion. She introduced Exhibit A, the video with audio of the spit, the words "useless hag," the threat of the home. We played it once without sound for the court to see the action, then once with sound so the words could sit in the room like a smell nobody liked. The judge leaned forward halfway through, then sat back, heavy. Exhibit B, the deed. The judge glanced, then nodded at the life estate language like a man who'd seen it before. Exhibit C, the realty email withdrawing. Exhibit D, the DBPR letter with the cease and desist. Exhibit E, the Instagram posts after the warning. Exhibit F, the bank alert, not to accuse, but to show pressure points forming around my accounts. Then my attorney asked if I could speak. I did carefully. "I'm 68. I sanded my own table last Christmas. I make lists when I'm scared. I recorded the lunch because the texts felt sharp. I want my house and my quiet. I don't want Alyssa in my kitchen until the hummingbird returns to me next spring. I don't want to be toured. Alyssa's lawyer stood and tried to fill the room with adjectives. My client was overwhelmed by a hostile environment, he said. She has been caring for her mother-in-law. By spitting in her lunch, the judge asked without looking up. The lawyer cleared his throat. An isolated incident. On video, the judge said. With a threat attached. The lawyer pressed on. He described me as confused. He pointed at the injunction I'd filed and called it retaliatory. He tried to admit a photo of a plate on my floor, Alyssa's plate thrown evidence, until my attorney enlarged it and we all saw the reflection of Alyssa's phone in the stainless steel dishwasher, her hand holding the plate at an angle that begged to slip. The judge held up a palm. That's enough, he turned to me. Miss Bennett, do you have anything further? I looked at my hands. They were steady. I want to eat at my own table, I said. I want to sleep with my door unlocked. I want my son to remember who raised him. The judge wrote, pen scratching on paper. Then he read the orders like a man reading a recipe he knew by heart. First, injunction for protection against exploitation granted for 1 year. Alyssa was barred from pressuring me to transfer property, barred from accessing my accounts, barred from entering my home without my written consent. Second, Alyssa's petition was dismissed with prejudice. The judge used the phrase not credible like a stamp. Third, the court took judicial notice of the DBPR letter and warned Alyssa that any continued unlicensed food operations could result in fines. He didn't set the fine, that wasn't his lane, but the warning came with a stare that traveled. Fourth, he suggested, in the soft voice judges use when they're not judging, that Mark and I consider mediation. Family splits break houses, he said. Try not to break this one. We left with papers that felt heavier than their weight. In the hallway, Alyssa hissed, "You did this to yourself." I didn't answer. Mark looked at me and then at the floor. Mom, He stopped. Words need a spine. He didn't have one yet. 2 weeks later, a certified letter arrived from DBPR imposing $2,500 in fines for operating without proper licensing and ignoring the cease and desist, plus a warning of $500 per day if she continued. A follow-up letter from the Department of Agriculture demanded proof of refunds to customers who'd prepaid for boards that weekend. I didn't frame the letters, but I did place them in the folder between the deed and the judgment, because consequences belong with protections, and paper likes company. Alyssa stopped posting boards. She started posting quotes about haters and jealous old witches, but she did it from a new account, with no address, no boards, and a private setting. That was her right. Silence was mine. Mark came by without her in late July. He stood on the porch in the heat, hat in hand like a man from another year. "I'm sorry," he said. The words sounded like they'd been stored in his chest and aired out too late. "I should have stopped it," I nodded. "You should have..." He looked down the street, where Mrs. Alvarez watered her bougainvillea with the patience of a saint. "I've moved out," he said, "staying with a friend for now. I filed for counseling." "You don't need to tell me where you sleep," I said. "You do need to tell yourself who you're going to be." He wiped his forehead with his shirt hem. "Can I come in?" I opened the door. "Take off your shoes." I mopped. He laughed once, a short bark like the first cough of an engine. He stepped out of his sneakers and lined them by the mat, where his old Converse used to sit. In a messy tent we drank lemonade at the table. The fan clicked. It always did. A week later, a small claims hearing landed on the calendar after my attorney filed a straightforward suit for battery, an intentional infliction of emotional distress. We weren't seeking a fortune. We were seeking a line on the ledger that said the action happened, that it had a cost in the world where receipts matter. At the hearing, I didn't tell stories. I offered the video. I offered the incident log. I offered the dental bill for a cracked lower denture from clenching my jaw that week so hard I'd bitten through a thin acrylic edge. It wasn't dramatic. It was $462 and a week of mushy food. The judge awarded $4,750 plus $385 in costs. He said a sentence that stuck like a tack in cork: people cannot spit on people and expect to walk back into their kitchens like nothing happened. The clerk stamped the judgment, and I watched the ink dry in the shape of the county's seal. We recorded the judgment. Alyssa didn't pay. The clerk mailed a notice of lien. Her new account posted fewer quotes. By September, the house was quiet in the way I'd asked for in June. I replaced the rooster tile with a plain glossy white because symbols don't make a kitchen, cooking does. I kept the manila folder in the top drawer by the stove, not out of fear but as a reminder that paper earns its keep when you use it. Mark came on Sundays without asking. He brought flowers sometimes. He repaired the screen door without comment. He said I'm working on it when I asked about counseling, and I believed him, not because the words felt heroic, but because they felt like grunt work. The good kind. In November, a holiday card arrived from the legal aid office. It had a blue snowflake sketched by a child. The note inside said, "You did the hard part. We're proud of you." I put it on the mantel between two small glass birds my husband left me. The birds caught morning light and scattered it in shards that made the living room look busy even when it wasn't. Sometimes at night, I walk the length of the house and touch the places that tried to become bargaining: chips, porch rail, mantel, sink. I say their names in my head the way people say prayers: lamp, knob, tile, hinge. The hinges still creak. The fan still clicks. The kettle still whistles like it has good news. Every once in a while, a dream wakes me. In the dream, Alyssa is leaning across the table, the Sunday light is the same, and her mouth forms the word eat. In the dream, I don't move. I let the scene run to its end, then I rewind it, and instead of shame, I feel the weight of the folder in my hands and the cool air of the courtroom on my face. I watch the judge say, "Granted," and I let the word roll across the table like a marble finding groove. I don't know what Alyssa dreams now. I don't need to know. I know what paper says, and paper sleeps near my stove, and my stove makes Sunday lunches that don't require anyone's permission. I set plates for people who use their mouths for kindness and their hands for dishes. The table still holds like the day I sanded it. The fan still clicks over us like a second hand that can't hurry me anywhere. I eat what I cook. I keep my door unlocked while the kettle warms. And when I lay out the plates, I lay out an empty one for the woman I used to be, the one who thought silence was safety. I tell her quietly so the words don't startle, "You own this house. You own your name." The porch light burns steady. The folder is thin now that the copies live in other places. The night is heavy with rain that hasn't fallen yet, and the table, the same table, waits for Sunday, clean and mine.